You know those YouTube comments that say, "Hey George Tomato, why doesn't Star Citizen take one whole patch to just fix all the bugs?" Well, you know what happens when they decide to do that? We'll honestly never know because they're never going to do that. But the newest patch to the game might be about as close as you can get, which is a bummer because it's still pretty buggy. The jury is out on long-term stability, but things are looking promising that this update is bringing some fixes to stability, performance, and quality of life. We've got anti-combat logging, MFD persistence, and HDR support, as well as Arena Commander updates looking pretty good to bring players more immediate gameplay. All that, the long-awaited Hull C, and some very anticipated ships and gameplay coming in subsequent 3.20 patches is actually making it look like a pretty interesting next couple of months for Star Citizen. But it all really hinges on the actual stability of the gameplay, which has been hampered by some early update problems on the back end, but ultimately does seem to be pretty solid outside of inventory issues. So let's jump in and see what all the changes are coming to the 3.20 branch of updates, and if they're enough to warrant jumping back in. Thank you for coming to my Tomato Talk. Let's start by taking a look at the big ticket items, the obvious additions. In locations, we've got Seraphim Station, a fully supplied cargo port stationed above Crusader instead of Port Olisar. The old station was all we had back in the first days of the alpha. Ever since 2.0, it's been the one constant throughout every update, so it's sad to see it go. But now for Crusader space lovers, you'll have full services in the Crusader planetary system with a spawn point and everything you'll need, which was sorely needed. Moving on to gameplay, we have another addition to the ongoing cargo refactor. Now instead of just one SCU boxes being used across the game, we have 2, 4, 8, 16, 24, and 32 SCU boxes. There isn't a ton of functionality connected with these boxes just yet, but they work how you'd expect. They are part of a larger update which I'll cover in a dedicated video later on, but for now the multi-tool has been buffed to be able to move any of these boxes. They can be stored and transported by ships, and of course looted and sold. Specifically and maybe more excitingly from the Hull C, which we'll get to. Next up in gameplay we have the new salvage mission coming from a new faction called the Tar Pits. This mission offers a more focused salvage opportunity based around hull scraping, but it is a criminal mission. So if you want to stay away from crime stats, you'll probably avoid this one. But it's all about covering up the fact that the ship belongs to some other gang members, hence the scraping off the hull. It's very on the nose, but the point is quite clear. This generally boils down to scraping the hull of a ship before a timer runs out. It's a simple and easy way to experience some new gameplay and get paid, and a good way for them to test the feature, assuming you can get a vulture, which I can confirm is available to purchase at New Deal in-game in 3.20. Mining has been the most developed industrial game loop for some time, but this year it has become an actual profession and source of diverse and engaging gameplay. With 3.20, that trend continues. Mining sees updates to mineral distribution across various rocks, continuing the changes from 3.19, a change to the way instability functions, scaling it up by rock size, adding more depth to the mechanic and more predictability without lessening the difficulty. And there's a little UI change that actually makes a pretty big difference. Now you can see just how much SCU the rock you found will supply to you. This last change makes logistics much easier when you're trying to calculate how many minerals you're going to get from a rock and whether it's worth attempting. In gameplay updates, you'll also notice ground vehicles greatly improved in the feel and handling they provide. While the system may still not be perfect, vehicles seem to stick to the ground and react to it in much more engaging and telling ways. You can now start to actually feel like you're bouncing along a bumpy moon surface, rather than just telling yourself that to feel better. There still isn't very much of a reason to use ground vehicles in many situations, but when it does come up, it's going to be a nicer experience now. And I think we've got many more ground scenarios coming with the various locations being worked on and the ground AI vehicle and perception updates we've been reading about. Then there is the bulk of the 3.20 update, Arena Commander. For almost a decade, this mode has sat to the side at various levels of importance in the development, but it never made much progress on its own. As a set of in-fiction video games, Arena Commander and Star Marine are accessed via sim pods that can sit in your hangar, hab, or ship, and allow you to play instant action simulations of various activities in Star Citizen's real world, but in this virtual environment. This is meant as a way to offer quick and easy gameplay, as well as opportunities for players to not worry so much about death. It's a great concept for a slow MMO, especially with long travel times, but it was in a miserable state for a pretty long time. With 3.20, the two modes are being combined into a single Arena Commander, a one-stop shop for all PvP and PvE quick action. This is the place to go if you want to just hop online for an hour or two and kick back with some actual gameplay. It's essentially Battlefield meets Star Citizen. You have some classic game modes like racing, dogfighting, and FPS battles, and semi-private lobbies and matchmaking services, hosted on a redesigned front end with much better access and visibility of information. You've got old racetracks updated to new racetracks coming in Atmosphere, which makes a huge difference, different new racetracks, new dogfighting maps, new FPS maps, new FPS modes like Gun Rush, a kill with each weapon sort of game type, and single weapon battles to see who has the better skill. Tank battles now offer the chance to group up for ground combat fights using the Nova tank and soon the new Tumbril Storm in a free-for-all or team-based fight, though they have already been temporarily rotated out because they just aren't working well yet. When it is consistent though, it's going to be a godsend considering how long it can take to set up tank battles in the PU, and that's really what the focus is here. Arena Commander is meant to offer bite-sized pieces of Star Citizen for easier experience and testing purposes in private server environments. It's always been there, but the 3.20 update is updating it back to certified playability, unfortunately not with the private servers part of that. There's more to come in the next couple updates that'll bring private servers and multi-crew ship support, but in my experience in 3.20 so far, it is now playable. Still a far cry from good, but it's playable. You're gonna run into desync and gun glitches that break up the fun, but you're gonna have a good time now. Now you may have caught I said testing in Arena Commander. This is also going to now act as the testbed for new features and functionality that might require a bit more of a gradual rollout. Experimental modes, which includes Gun Rush and tank battles, also will host these features. The first we'll be testing is Master Modes, the new flight model that focuses on improving the combat experience while defining a window of high velocity speed known as Navigation Mode. Essentially, this takes us back to the flight model pre-3.0 when you would have higher cruise speeds and lower SCM combat speeds. Now it's defined by flipping an arbitrary switch on your ship, but the idea is the same. Combat speeds are meant to be slowed down quite a bit so that players can enjoy and understand what's going on more, while higher speeds will be reserved for navigation, but will limit your shields and weapon usage. There's going to be a ton of feedback taken on this feature and a lot of testing going into it before it's implemented into the game, so make sure to get into this mode and test it out for yourself and see what you think. I'll be covering this mode in a later video as it develops more, but I'm not much of a combat person, so I don't really have too much going on in this race. Now that wraps up the major feature additions for this patch, but it's not even close to everything included. And don't forget, we'll have to follow up 3.20 with 0.1 and 0.2 as well. Now let's start with new ships. The Hull C is the star of the show in 3.20, bringing in a whopping 4,600 plus SCU carrying capacity, absolutely dwarfing the previous cargo heavyweight. This is a big addition for 3 reasons. 1, it's been on the backlog for almost a decade. This is a good older ship to get out of the way for its variants to have a base. 2, this begins to change the scale of Star Citizen and force more focus on cargo and the economy. It isn't happening as fast as many of us felt it should, but cargo hauling and the economy are changing to match this scale change. Over the next few patches and years, we'll see missions, features, and initiatives starting to change the core of Star Citizen's industrial backbone. Freight elevators, tractor beams, hangar storage, it all mainly begins with this. And number 3, the existence of this ship proves out a lot of unique technology that'll make other ships more functional. Just a few features with knock-on effects due to this are docking, ship modularity, and physics grids. All that good news being said, as alluded to earlier, we'll need to keep waiting for most of this to matter. The economy remains virtually unchanged right now, information visibility is still at a low, and the only thing changing in the actual hauling process is the Hull C using a cargo loading timer when picking up from cargo ports. While this is an interesting mechanic, it is a placeholder for NPCs and a mechanic meant to affect all ships, not just the Hull C, so it's more a test than an actual implementation. Thus, most players won't even notice the implementation of this monumental ship, but I think that's okay. A good addition with some flaws, but it'll be a while before it really matters. Then there is the Mirai Fury LX. Not much to be said other than it is a racing variant for the Fury unveiled earlier this year. We've been hearing about this in monthly reports over the months, so scratch one off your unannounced variants bingo card. Take a chance to check this out though, if not now, then during IAE later this year. With some new flight changes in 3.20 which kind of change up the effect you have when flying through atmosphere, it can be fun to low fly. Now that's it for ships in 3.20, but in about a month we'll likely see a 3.20.1 update with a number of additions to the game. A couple things we already know will be there are the Tumbrel Storm tank, a small rapid strike vehicle that'll make a good addition to tank battles, and the A1 Spirit, a small to medium 1 to 2 person light bomber from Crusader, introducing size 5 bombs to the game, and the first of a few new variants from Crusader Industries. The second of which will be the C1 Spirit, likely coming with Alpha 3.20.2, probably a month later in November, but could always be coming sooner. I am particularly excited to see if this ship might become my daily driver over the current MSR. These ships will be good additions to the game and likely popular daily drivers. But then there is the long-awaited Argo SRV, actually a significant and late addition to the patch expectations for some 3.20.x, only just mentioned to us this past week. The SRV not only introduces the idea of a tugboat in space able to haul away old ships, mineable asteroids, and derelict wrecks, with it comes the functionality of vehicle tractor beams, which will affect other vehicles like the Nomad, Connie Taurus, Cutlass, Hull C, Argo MPUV, and more. The SRV is another expected big addition of the year, and it's good to see it landing in the 3.20 branch. Along with these ships though, I think we'll see a couple other significant surprises over the course of the 3.20 patch. But the most important thing we can hope for is stability, especially after the first half of this year. With a new code base for the first time since the beginning of 2023, 3.20 has the potential to fix a lot of annoying bugs and offer the most stable play experience we've gotten so far this year. Let's take a look at the bug fixes, little bits, quality of life improvements, and stability plans for this new update. Alright, most interesting thing first, anti-combat logging measures. This came out of nowhere but answers some loud and long pleas for protection from players who simply disconnected right before death. Now the game will persist your ship and body for a short period of time after you log off, so make sure you're somewhere safe. This of course will be abused and broken at first, but it's a good start. You know what else deserves a good start? Moderation tools, which we are finally starting to see. Now players will be able to restrict comm calls to just friends and hide notifications from certain players. Again, not much, but it's a start. Another quality of life improvement are all quantum travel HUDs being virtually aligned now. No more weird pitching around to get quantum travel to start, and better visibility to go along with the improved group quantum travel display. We are due for a complete overhaul of the system soon, but this may be some early preparation. Speaking of readability, the Mobiglass menu is now darker to make it easier to see in more lighting scenarios, despite accessibility taking a bit of a step back. More on that later. For crafting, empty RMC cans can now be made in the Vulture and Reclaimer. Might not sound big, but it was really annoying not being able to easily FPS salvage if you wanted to. In addition to the mining changes we've already discussed in this video, the pilot of a mole can now get a mining HUD readout that shows information about the targeted rocks. MFDs will now persist per vehicle, another long requested quality of life feature that leads to more customizable ships that actually feel like yours. This may also be some early work preparing for an update we know is due soon. With Gen 12 added to the game in 3.18, we are already seeing graphical benefits in the form of HDR functionality. A key tool for high contrast performance for those who actually have true HDR monitors, this will be a good setting to see mature over time for a space game. Along with global illumination being developed for the future in the form of ray tracing, in 3.20, Star Citizen continues to improve its visuals. Speaking of visuals, Microtech has been improved. I did not capture 319 footage of the planet, but Terada did. His video is linked down below if you want to see more. The planet looks much better with the new changes, and you should expect to keep seeing updates like this to planets and the R-Corp clouds in 319 over time. And there is still so much more, folks. The destroyed drug stash missions in the bunkers received some major fixes and performance enhancements. Cargo manifests have been added to all bounty, assassination, and salvage missions, building the complexity of the game into all corners of it and expanding the possibilities of each mission. With more changes like this, your combat missions will offer repair, refuel, engineering, salvage, cargo manipulation, and medical jobs as well. Combat missions have seen the addition of almost all combat-capable ships added to build diversity into the combat encounters around the game. So you're looking at larger combat ships with the ability of carrying cargo around like they just have an ongoing manifest. It's led to some really cool possibilities. My org, GII, which you can sign up for down below, is now running weekly events where we attack large-scale bounties and take all the cargo they were carrying. It pays out hundreds of thousands per player, even in groups of 10, making for some pretty diverse gameplay, making use of just this single small change to the game. It's a pretty good one in my opinion. Climbing and clambering was improved with a ledge grab function that allows players to stop their fall mid-air. While not seeming to work as wide as I would hope, this will be one of the first features shown off at CitizenCon's partnered development panel last year that is actually making it into players' hands. It took longer than expected and, as I said, seemingly doesn't allow mantling across all surfaces like we'd hoped, but it's an improvement in climbing. There is a new UI update to much of the menu, making it more contrast heavy and visible, and contextual hints are more prevalent throughout the game. That being said, as I mentioned before, accessibility has taken a step back with this update. Some things are more contrast heavy, but font sizes have gone down. UI elements seem to be lighting up less, such as with the cruise control identifier, and some other changes in the menu seem to be making things more difficult for those who are hard of sight. I hope to see accessibility features in Star Citizen improve along with the rest of quality of life we're seeing. A server crash recovery update was implemented, which should have your ship respawning back at whatever station you last hailed, if your server does crash and you get a 30k. This will probably be much better than the ship going back to your home location as it used to be. Finally, a few more quality of life improvements. Party members who shoot at each other will no longer be immediately marked as hostile to other players, continuing the reliance on player parties, which will likely become crews, in assigning responsibilities, permissions, and communications. Screen notifications have been added to notify players which faction owns the territory you are entering when trespassing. Enemy AI are supposedly no longer slow to react. From what I've seen so far, AI might not fight back, but they are definitely moving, approaching, and sometimes flanking players, definitely mixing up the combat scenarios in 3.20. In other bug fix news, the invisible player bug which plagued the last 2 patches has seemingly been remedied. Oh, and my favorite, no more broken wrists when leaving a ship in 0G. Transitions from 0G to gravity and back are perfect. It's very nice and also a bit jarring to see it work so well, to be honest. And for global events, it seems we'll be seeing Jumptown here very shortly and Siege of Orison likely in 3.20.1 after recent improvements have been implemented along with the Orison City missions that were removed in 3.19. Those Orison City missions will be added with some new locations we've been seeing recently and additional FPS missions along with them in 3.20.1 or 0.2. And then there are the most important questions: stability, desync, and general performance. I can say this, the game runs smoother than it ever has when it comes to my own frame rate. I still have some issues in cities, but I've been playing all week and just finished a 14-hour play session, which you can find here on my YouTube channel, and I experienced 130k, 1 crash to desktop, and mostly smooth frame rates. Little instability, like things not loading in, UI taking some time, and general desync was still around, but not nearly as bad as 319, and I won't even get into 318. I will say right now, there is a miserable inventory bug going around that makes the game almost unplayable, but outside of that, it seems about normal. We've seen an immense amount of back-end server issues on day one that was seemingly going to be avoided per the 3.18 postmortem just a couple weeks ago, and an additional patch is coming soon to fix some major problems, but 3.20 seems to be the best patch we've had this year in terms of playability. And it's offered the same amazing initial experiences offered by the cargo refactor and persistent entity streaming at the beginning of the year, but in a much more stable and enjoyable group environment, which goes a long way. That being said, I still don't think it's there for players who left after 3.17 to return to. I'd check back with 3.20.1 in about a month's time, which should have some more time to cook and stabilize with the QA and include a couple additional vehicles. There are a lot of edge cases and special interactions that might or might not be working. And while this patch is feeling good, it does feel rushed after such a long PTU cycle ending in a relatively bug-heavy push to live. We may not know the reasoning for why that would be, but it will likely be another week or two before we can call whether it was time or not. If you're interested in keeping up on the performance of the patch, development of the game, what features and ships are coming next, or more Star Citizen content like this, you can subscribe here. As a brand new patch, I appreciate this one. It doesn't bring much new to the game, especially the PU. Many of the features like EVA T2, scanning, and radar are nowhere to be seen, although I am glad to see tractor beams in here finally. But you know what? A lot is about to change with this game, and 3.18 put us in a frozen state for half a year, if not more. I hope this patch gives players a solid foundation to experience what PES has done for the game so far, what Star Citizen really is in this pre-server meshing state, and just some good agreeable gameplay in general. I'll be streaming the patch weekly, hosting guests to share their thoughts on the update, publishing videos about the near future, and more across this channel and my second, Space Tomato 2. So if you want to keep up with the game, consider checking them out. And join me on my podcast for the real thoughts of many of the SC content creators you know. I hope 3.20 treats you well this fall, I hope you learned something new in this video, and I'll catch you in the next.